Okay, Dawn Cappelli, our fearless keynote speaker, who is the Director of Operational Technology Cyber. She's part of the Cyber Emergency Readiness Team from Dragos. Everyone, Dawn has last minute decided to join our panel, and we're happy to have her on here. Jim Mahony is the Chief Information Security Officer at Robert Morris University, and also another one of our great panelists today. Congratulations, Jim. We have Sam Merrell, who is Chief Information Security Officer at Kennametal, and he is part of our panel today as well. Thanks for being here, Sam. Anahi, is that how I say it? Anahi. I know, Jessica told me how to say it. I messed it up. Santiago, is that right? Okay, is the Chief Information Security Officer at ChristianaCare. Congratulations. And last, but very not least, is Jessica Hoffman, who will be moderating our panel today, is the Deputy CISO HIPAA Security Officer at the City of Philadelphia. And you guys are in for a treat. She was our keynote speaker in Philadelphia, and she will be moderating, and I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and our panelists, so let's welcome them all.
Thank you, Kim and FutureCon. I must have did something right. They asked me to come back. Yay. So, welcome. Everybody excited? We have a good day? Woo! Everybody awake still? Well, if you're not, you're going to get awake because I'm pretty loud and we're going to be loud. All right. So, we got an amazing panel here. You met Dawn earlier. She's a rock star. What's up, Dawn? And I know we have a great crowd out there, so we want this to be interactive. If you have any questions as we go along, put your hand up, scream, whatever. I want to hear from you. We'll get much from you as you get from us. You know what I mean? That's how we roll. Security, circular learning. So we're going to start out with some introductions. So hello, I'm Jessica. Really happy to be back. In all seriousness, what Kim and her team does here is really great, bringing us all together, sharing experiences, because that's what this community is about. So let's start with Jim. Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And here's the million-dollar question. What keeps you up at night?
Okay. So, can you hear me? All right. So, Jim Mahony, CISO at Robert Morris University from Pittsburgh. Been working in IT in Pittsburgh since '99. Working in the computer space and cyberspace for a long time. And what keeps me up at night? Maybe let's call it the unknown, right? People within an organization who want to buy the next big shiny thing, whether it be an IoT something or an AI something. They don't know how it works. They know what comes out of it, whether it makes light in the room or creates you a poem if you give it input, but they don't know how it works or what it does with your data.
That never happens.
Every day.
Don?
Well, I am happy to say, since I retired as CISO, nothing keeps me awake at night anymore. I had PTSD after I retired. I had the cell phone next to the bed for 6 months, and my husband said, "You're retired. No one's calling in the middle of the night anymore." So nothing keeps me awake at night. But I really do have that mission of wanting to safeguard the world. And so what bothers me when I'm awake is just protecting all the small and medium critical organizations out there.
Sam?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sam Merrell. I'm the CISO for Kennametal. We're a global manufacturing company based here in Pittsburgh. I don't know where to go as far as introductions, but what keeps me up at night is my own company often. It's shadow IT. It's, I think what Jim said, is people trying to run as fast as they can without really appreciating the consequences. And so I find myself being a lot more of an educator than I ever thought I was, and I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Sam. Real quick, anybody else have shadow IT problems? Raise your hand. Don't play. I know every one of you. And Anahi?
Good afternoon. Anahi Santiago. I am the CISO at ChristianaCare, largest health system in Delaware, with facilities in New Jersey, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Been there 9 years. Prior to that, Einstein Healthcare Network in Philadelphia for 10 and a half years, and as a CISO and privacy officer, so just a glutton for punishment. What keeps me up at night, and we were talking a little bit about this as we were prepping, is as a healthcare organization, patients' lives. We talked about, protecting data. That's not the thing that scares me. The thing that scares me is a massive cyber attack where our clinicians aren't able to care for our patients because our information systems aren't available for them to make decisions. And even more so than that, it's the fact that our clinicians think that our information security team is a bunch of superheroes that are just going to swoop in and save the day within a couple hours, when the reality of it is it's going to take us forever to recover from a massive cyber attack given the size of our organization, and caregivers are going to have to care for patients without electronic health records for weeks, if not months. And so that's the thing that keeps me up at night. It's less our ability to protect the organization, more so people's ability to work without technology in the face of a cyber attack.
Yeah, great point. I'm also the HIPAA security officer for the city, so when we're talking about critical infrastructure, critical care, critical services from a city, municipality, state, federal level, like those are the things that matter, right? I often say, somebody has a crisis, everybody's freaking out. You're like, are you bleeding? Are you dying? Is this a Monday problem? Is this a tomorrow problem? Right? So I know it's a lot of times it's our responsibility to compartmentalize and help people like, okay, calm down, level-headed, let's talk through this, and get to the bottom of it. So that's what keeps me up at night too. And Anahi and I came all the way from Philly to see you guys, so hold your applause. So let's start with you, Anahi. Now that you mentioned that, and how critical healthcare services are within the health sector, period, whether it's hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, Medicare, Medicaid, everything, right? Given the recent incident, everybody heard of the Change Healthcare, which that is one for the books, right? It was so dynamic and interesting and impactful on so many levels. Could you tell us a little bit about how that did directly impact the continuity of your operations?
Sure. So before I start with the gloom and doom, about them Phillies. Who's a Phillies fan? Number one in the league.
We in Steelers country. That got you. Okay.
I did look for to see if there was a Pirates game. Oh, Eagles chant. They're everywhere.
There's Eagles one in the corner.
I heard.
She's all the way in the corner.
Yeah, so Change Healthcare. For those of you that have not heard of the Change Healthcare breach, Change is a third-party supplier that serves a third of the healthcare industry across the country. So they are responsible for processing claims from hospitals to insurance companies so that hospitals can get billed. Not just hospitals, physician practices, outpatient clinics. They verify insurance insurance benefits for patients. So think about a patient showing up at CVS to get a prescription. They verify that they actually have the insurance to get the prescription. They do a whole lot of other stuff. On February 21st, I'll never forget the date, they suffered a massive breach. They are still recovering. They're not 100%. We're now July 11th. And there were, ripples across the nation. Patients had to pay out of pocket for prescriptions because the pharmacies couldn't verify their insurance. You had small physician practices providers that couldn't afford, they weren't getting paid for services provided. They couldn't afford to pay their employees, so they were taking home mortgages out and home loans to pay their employees. As a large healthcare organization, we, on a daily basis, were laying out $9 million and not being able to get any reimbursement for that. So just cash outflow. And even though we had a really healthy credit line, we still, healthy reserves, we still chose to take out credit lines because it was cheaper to get credit lines and pay those interests than it would have been to take the penalties to take stuff out. But it really, I mean, people went bankrupt. And so it just speaks to the over-reliance on supply chain. The day before change happened, I had actually spoken to 80 of our leaders about what keeps me up at night. The over-reliance or over-expectation of information security to just come in and protect. I wasn't even talking to them about the over-reliance on supply chain and how that could affect us. And a day later, here we just got pummeled. And so much so that, I mean, the CEO of Change was in front of Congress for 2 days getting grilled. A few of us were actually invited to the White House to talk about like how we can help healthcare get better. But I don't think we think enough about, I think you started with, or we talked about the supply chain. Like we don't think about, we think about protecting our organization. We don't think enough about what can happen when one of our primary vendors gets hit and what that can do to our industry. And for healthcare, certainly ChristianaCare, we felt it hard and we're still not recovered. They haven't recovered enough to help us recover. It's been that significant. We're talking 4 months later. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to add from a...
Yeah, so the idea of supply chain risk is one that's important to us because Kennametal is a supplier to many other companies. So big manufacturers that you all know, big names, automobiles, aircraft, they all rely on our parts. And so we have to recognize our role in the supply chain for others. We are suppliers to the U.S. Department of Defense, and so we have a number of different regulations, thank you, different regulations that we have to live up to because of our importance in the DoD supply chain. So this concept of supply chain risk is one that we take very seriously. We're always in this kind of introspective phase as we're making sure that we're doing what we need to do to protect the company, but then we're also always reporting outwards to our customers, to the people who consume our products, to make sure they can trust us as a supplier for them. So it's something that we really focus on quite a lot.
So I told you this morning about I came out of retirement to become the security fairy godmother. The reason that I did that is because as CISO at Rockwell, when ransomware started becoming prevalent in 2019, we put a lot of resources into securing our own infrastructure against ransomware, both IT and OT. But then all of a sudden we started getting letters from suppliers who, we define third-party risk as if they have access to our IP, our network, or our facilities, then they have to go through a third-party risk assessment. But we started getting letters from suppliers that supplied like copper for our products. And they didn't have access to any of those things. They just supplied us copper. I never cared about their cybersecurity program until all of a sudden we'd get a letter saying we were hit with ransomware. We have no idea how long it'll take to recover. It'll be at least a month before we can get you our product. And I realized their cybersecurity risk presents an operations risk to us. And that's what really got me going down this path of we have to help these small and medium-sized organizations because they don't have much of anything and they impact all the rest of us.
And interesting you say that, Dawn, too, because a few years back, we didn't really think about third-party risk, right? And a lot of times, even now, people think of it as a logical connection, right? Like your cloud vendor or SharePoint or Smartsheet or whatever you're using, right? But it's also your janitorial staff, right? Your kitchen staff. Could be for medical, who's doing your labs, running your labs. Like Dawn said, you might not care about their cybersecurity because they're not sharing like logical data, but they have maybe physical access, or from an operational perspective, you can't function without the service they're providing, no matter how small it is. That's why NIST 171, CMMC, we have these compliance regulations that are out there to help us with those small businesses. So thanks for bringing that up, because I feel like people don't really consider what a third party is. You just think it's just always who you're sharing your data with, and that's not always the case. I know, Jim, did you have something to add for that?
Yeah, we had talked about third-party risk and supply chain risk, and it's critically important, and it's frankly not really that hard to do it at like an entry level. You don't need seasoned cybersecurity engineers to review third-party risk assessments or SOC 2s. Frankly, I use interns. I taught them how to read an audit report and how to conduct a risk assessment, and they bring anomalies to my attention or any gaps to my attention if there's decisions that need to be made. But you can hire people at the lowest level and teach them to do that for you if you don't already have that. And if you don't have that, then you need to implement some type of third-party risk management program to secure things like your copper, in addition to many other services where you're actually integrating with data and other forms of risk as well.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit, Jim, on some of the processes that go into your third-party risk management?
Sure, yeah. So we have our own platform. We built a risk assessment that we can send out to third parties if they don't have other things. We tell them, say, we're going to send you a risk assessment. We need you to complete it unless you already have one of the following, right? Like a SOC 2 or some other third-party audit that's been done within the last 12 months and contains these different domains. Like a SOC 2 would typically have everything that we would need. And we make sure that the business knows that they have to go through that phase before anything is signed off and any kind of paperwork is completed. It's very important. And the business owners on our side who want to buy product X or service X, they're the ones who will push on the supplier to make sure that they get that. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to buy whatever the thing is. And we expedite the reviews when needed. And again, if anybody's ever read a risk assessment, you just have to sit down for a little while and go through it, and you understand where the gaps need to be filled, if there are gaps, and what to look for. It's really not that hard, but it really mitigates a mountain of risk. And until you start doing it, you don't know how risky it is. You'll find little mom and pop organizations conducting business out of their garage. You've seen it, right? Yeah, it's terrible. And any rate.
So does that mean, So does that mean there's no new shiny things in your organization?
No, there are, but not the ones made in someone's garage.
Okay.
Right? Sometimes they're very small organizations, but they can put in processes. They don't necessarily have to have all the formality of a tenured company that's got thousands of employees. But if they only have 2 developers and they're outsourced and they don't even know where those developers lived because they hired them on the internet, well, I'm not interested. And that happens. Yeah.
How many of you all have a mature third-party risk management procedure process? Okay, all right, I love it.
Yeah.
How many of you read SOC reports? Okay, all right, GRC people, what's up?
Yeah. And let me just say one thing. So we talked about this for a minute. I'll try not to drag on, but doing that work is really important. And like I said, I have interns that do it. They're college students. I work at a university. And it took me it didn't take long to train them how to do it and what to look for and to bring it to my attention. There was talk earlier today about how the job market is just crazy. You can't find enough people to fill the positions that you have and to fill the openings that you have. Well, maybe you've got someone doing those third-party reviews that maybe they're way in a different tax bracket than they should be for someone who's doing third-party reviews. They should be doing maybe more detailed technology or information security work, and you could hire somebody off the street who's never, like an intern, who's someone who's getting a degree in programming or computer science or information security, and you could have them do it for far less than you're paying right now, maybe.
If anybody has any questions at all, just shout out. I saw you yawning over there. Okay. All right, what's up? You got a question? We need a microphone. Go ahead, shout it out, repeat it.
In terms of helping manage your third-party risks, do you think third-party business continuity within like business continuity or disaster recovery plans, so that there's a
Hold on, stop. Sorry, that sounded really good. Can you do it again?
So in terms of helping manage your third-party risks, do you think we'll see an increase in including third-party business continuity inside of like our own internal business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans, so that if one of your critical vendors does go down, there will be a plan in place and there won't be as much risk associated with it?
Let me just start. So that's within the questionnaire of the risk assessment that we conduct right now. Do you have an incident response plan and a disaster recovery plan and business continuity and all of that stuff? Data backup, et cetera, all the things that you would expect.
So we take more of a risk-based approach on that. And so I think you mentioned it, for critical suppliers, we would hold to a higher standard, right? So we would apply that level of scrutiny, but if it's more commodity, like low impact, then we probably wouldn't.
What we did was so when I was CISO at Rockwell during COVID, I was in the weekly meetings with the CEO and all of his SVPs, and I heard what went on with our SVP of manufacturing, because if you think back to what happened during COVID, like planes couldn't take off, ships couldn't get into the US, so supply chain management was really an issue. And so at that point, because of COVID, our supply chain organization really thought about that. Like, what do we do if we can't get if we can't get a product from this supplier? Who's next in line? So in that way, it was built into the business continuity plan because of COVID, not because of cyber risk. But cyber risk is just another reason that they could lose that vendor. So they should be doing that.
So if I can add a couple of things. Before change, we were really proud of the fact that we would do tabletop exercises with our third parties, like what we thought were critical suppliers. We would bring them in, whether it was Kronos or Workday or ServiceNow, pull them in to our tabletop exercises. We didn't know change was a critical vendor for us. So one of the things that we've now done is taken a look at all of our third parties and really doing a criticality, like a formal criticality assessment that is not driven by security, but is driven by the risk management function of our organization to identify who do we truly rely on to keep the lights on, not just technology, but across operations. And so what I would add is, in addition to doing the assessments for your critical vendors, make sure you understand who your critical vendors are, and then pull them into your tabletop exercises and run through scenarios that involve them not being accessible so that you can really exercise your cyber resiliency, operational resiliency.
And one other thing to think about when it comes to third-party risk is SolarWinds and Log4j, because it's not just companies that have access to your net. Talk about keeping me awake at night. Like, I'm so tired of my Christmases being ruined. That's why I retired.
That was during Christmas. SolarWinds.
Log4j was one Christmas. SolarWinds was the Christmas before. But you can't just think about companies that have access to your data or your network. It's products that you're bringing in and putting on your network as well. So that was a big lesson learned there, that we need to look at not only their IT security, but their product security.
You're giving me anxiety right now. I'm like having flashbacks. I used to be an auditor, and so like, whoo, they're like, why? It's coming from Dell, it's in the box, it's fine. Yeah, what about the firmware? Or,
The thing is with us, like, we didn't even use SolarWinds, and we said, ooh, we don't use SolarWinds. And then we said, maybe we better check just to be sure. Well, sure enough, 10 IT people had taken a class that required SolarWinds. So guess what? We had SolarWinds on our network and had to go into full-blown incident response because of those 10 people. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
This is such an important topic when we're talking about supply chain and third-party risk and all that, because like I was said earlier, we didn't really think about this in depth maybe as soon as 5-6 years ago, right? I also want to point out that you might know your prime contractor, right? But do you know who they're subcontracting with? Do you know where your data is flowing all the way down? And those are the questions that if you scratch the surface with the prime, you're like, oh, they look good, they do a SOC, whatever. But they might go with the mom and pop or whomever. Nothing against mom and pop, okay? We start somewhere, small business owner, respect. But if you don't fully know where your data is going, not even just your data, right, the products, if you don't know that whole chain, then that means you could potentially have a weak link that you have no idea about.
Okay, sorry, you're triggering my PTSD.
I know. We're like, let's go.
Now let's go to 4th of July, Kaseya. So Kaseya, I don't know, how many here remember Kaseya? It was a company that was hit, and they were used to spread ransomware to all of their customers. And we looked and said, oh, thank goodness we don't use Kaseya. And then our third-party risk manager said, wait a minute, we just signed a deal with that service provider, and I could have sworn I remember they said they use Kaseya. Sure enough, they use Kaseya. So you are exactly right. Like, where does it end? So it's a hard problem.
We have a hard job.
That's why I retired.
She did her time. Well, let's continue this in incident response. So, gentleman asked a question about incident response plans baked into our third party, and obviously, well, hopefully everybody has a incident response plan, playbooks, all that within your organization, doing the tabletop tests. So, anybody want to just give some details, or not too much details, but a little information about maybe something you experienced with your tabletop, what you learned, how much it helped you, whether you did it conceptually or simulation. Those are super important.
So one of the things we do is we take our day-to-day incidents. We have run-of-the-mill malware, et cetera, and we track that information to build what our next tabletop is going to be. Right. So we try to say, like, okay, if we extended this problem a little bit further, what's the pain we could feel? And then we're a global company, so we try to also pay attention to what's going on in the globe. And so we try to blend a worst case, most likely scenario to be our next tabletop exercise. And so it requires not only doing incident response bite by bite, but then also taking a look back to see over the last year, what are the most common incidents we have, and where did they occur, and why did they occur, and what happens if we turn that volume up a little bit, and how bad could it be? And that helps us kind of root our tabletops in reality. And so when we bring in stakeholders who don't think cyber, sometimes they don't even think IT, but then they get to follow the narrative of, well, we have operations in Israel, for example, and there's the politics that happens in Israel might make us a target. We can build a story that has plausibility, and that gets us a lot of support for making improvements. And so I think the rigor around incident response on a regular basis gives us more capital to carry forward to make improvements in the long term.
I feel like I'm talking too much, but
It's okay, Don.
But I looked to see, is she going to grab the mic? You didn't look like you were, and you weren't grabbing the mic.
We're all friends here. Go ahead.
So I strongly advocate having a tabletop exercise if you can get your CEO in there. We had one for our CEO and his senior vice presidents. And we had, just like our general counsel said, you can't put them on the spot. You can't have injects and have them give the wrong answer and look bad. You can't do that. But we still had injects. We said, okay, phase one, here's what happens. Then this, and it's in IT. The ransomware hits IT first. And they're kind of like, what's the impact on the customers? That was their big thing. What's the impact on the customers? Inject 3 hit our biggest plant, and they're like, they knew immediately like how much money that plant brings in per day. And we went out and got SEC filings from manufacturing companies, and we said, based on everything we looked at, here's how long we think that plant would be down. You could see them calculating what that came out to. And boy, did we get their attention. That they were so on board for our manufacturing security program after that. And I knew I was successful when we did this on like Monday, December 14th. Friday night at 7 o'clock, I get a call from our SVP of manufacturing, and he said, Dawn, I've been thinking about that tabletop all week. And I was thinking, what if we don't get hit, but what if one of our distributors get hit? We'll have a whole warehouse full of goods and no way to ship them. And what are we going to do about that? And I thought, yes, we were successful because now he's even thinking outside the box. So it can be really effective to go through a tabletop for your execs.
Hold on, here's quiz time real quick, Anahi. Don just dropped 2 gems on y'all that you could take back right now and make a difference. What were they?
Get your CEO in the tabletop.
Bam, get your CEO, executive leadership who don't really care about cyber, whatever. And what else? Money. Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, we hired, I won't say the name of the firm, but we actually hired a firm that is going to do a cyber range for us for executives. So we're shipping our CEO and 20 of her top leaders to DC in an immersive environment to do an executive tabletop, and they are getting scenarios, and we're going to inject things, and I'm not even privy to the scenarios so that I can also be tested in terms of my reaction to the environment. We're going to use that to then tree it up to our board and to educate our board on what the experience will be, not only for the executives, but for what the board should expect. What I wanted to share is that one of the things for those of you that don't have a plethora of money to bring in people, CISA will do it for you.
Bam.
CISA has a slew of free resources, and one of them is they will come in and conduct tabletop exercises for your team, IT, executives, you name it. They actually, what we did in Philadelphia so healthcare is so interconnected. If one of us goes down, the rest of us will feel it. We are the only level 1 trauma center between Philadelphia and Baltimore. If we go down and there are traumas, they either the ambulances have to go to Philadelphia, 35 miles, or they have to go 50 miles to Baltimore. It's not a pretty picture for really sick people. And so what CISA did for us is they pulled all of the regional healthcare systems. There were 129 people in the room, all going through a regional tabletop exercise collectively so that we could learn from each other, so that we can understand our interdependencies, and it was all for free. And we also invited our suppliers. Microsoft was there, our Cerner and Epic, which are EHRs, were there, IR firms that we have on retainer were there. So take advantage of those resources, which are free to you if you want to leverage experience without having to pay for it.
Y'all know who CISA is, right?
I should have asked that.
No, well, yes, everybody? Okay. Well, if you don't, go Google right now. They actually have a ton of resources, and one of them is step-by-step playbooks for a tabletop exercise. So, as Anahi mentioned, some of you, your businesses might not have $1 million budget, might not even have a $100,000 budget when it comes to security. So you gotta be innovative, right? And one of the ways is to do a conceptual tabletop test. So that's just as good. You talk about the scenario of something happening. I remember back in the day, one of our conceptual was everybody had the bird flu and we couldn't go in the office. What are we gonna do? So, make sure it's realistic though. But CISA is a great resource. I work with my regional directors, probably seeing what she has, Philly. But yes, please do. So, did you want to say something real quick? Go ahead.
About CISA. If you don't know Bob Kaminsky, who is the Pittsburgh CISA cybersecurity advisor, he's fantastic, and you want to have him on your speed dial. Like when Aliquippa happened, I saw it on KDKA. I texted Bob. He got back to me immediately. He said, I'm standing outside their office with the FBI. We're about to go in. Like, you really should know Bob. If you don't know him And I don't know how to tell you to get in touch with them. You can come up and I'll connect you with them. But really, you should know Bob Kaminsky. He's great.
I can tell you. You can, I mean, so CISA is the Department of Homeland Security arm, and I believe it's CISA.gov that you can reach out to. And they are so incredibly invested in being a resource to all of us that they will respond immediately with your regional advisor and stay connected with you. So I encourage all of you, don't be intimidated by the concept of it's CISA, it's Department of Homeland Security. They will be there if you try to connect with them.
Good point. And they're here for all of us, not just government organizations or supply chains. Like, they're truly here to make the world better and combat against cyber threats and adversaries. So Anahi mentioned about her tabletop or the simulation that they did and brought all the hospitals together. And such a good point, because you're the only Trauma One hospital in Philly, between Philly and Baltimore. That's pretty big, right? When we talk about, are you dying, are you bleeding, what's wrong, can this wait till Monday? If you're dying, probably can't wait till Monday. So I thought that was a great point as far as collaboration and information sharing, right? So we got to know who our neighbors are. They might not be directly connected with us. We might not be sharing data. We might not even, share the same street or same city, but we have to understand what's going on all around us when it comes to our industry and the services we provided, plus those industries that support us. So I just wanted to know from Jim, who is with higher education, and by the way, that is one of the top industries that CISA and the FBI focus on, right? Because believe it or not, our universities and colleges, even elementary schools, they have a lot of data on our citizens, our kids, and all that stuff. So can you talk a little bit about the collaboration and information sharing that you do among other higher education? Yeah.
I can. Actually, I work with, I see Bob all the time. Not all the time, but I see him at industry events. There's a collective of higher eds in Pennsylvania that share membership with the NCFTA, which is based here in Pittsburgh. For anybody, I see some heads nodding. You guys know who that is? And I go down there probably at least once a quarter, maybe twice. And I've presented with my team to other higher eds, and we've seen lots of great presentations, and we engage with through the NCFTA. If I have an incident or a potential incident, I have some questions, I can reach out to my partners down there at the NCFTA, and then they share information with the other intelligence services at their disposal, which are like CISA and the DHS and the FBI and the Secret Service and every other federal four-letter agency that there is. So it's great having that as a partnership. But additionally, in higher ed, not just through the security perspective that's around that NCFTA relationship, but we always, I'm on email threads and chat groups with my peers all across Pennsylvania, and I've connected with a number of other folks across the nation and overseas, in fact, to bounce ideas off each other. Because in higher ed, it's different. I've worked in big business downtown Pittsburgh here, and higher ed's a much smaller budget, that's for sure. So, and all the schools, we're all trying to help each other figure out how we can build a better mousetrap. And so we collaborate a lot. It's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a couple things specific here in Pittsburgh. So I'm the sector chief for manufacturing for InfraGard. So if you're not familiar with InfraGard, it's the FBI public-private partnership. You should be involved because it's open to anybody. And so if you have an interest and you're not a member, let me know. I can help you with that. One of the things that we're doing, not to kind of dovetail into what Don was talking about earlier, but we have a Pittsburgh-focused OT-security group, Steel City OT-Sec. And so if you happen to be working in a OT security role or curious about it, you're welcome to join us as well. We have meetings, we alternate in person and online every month. So we've focused on different challenges like how do you manage shadow IT in an OT environment? And so we try to push that sharing of information. And then also when we want to look upstream, we also belong to formal ISACs. And so that's a really useful tool to share threat information, to share incident information, to learn a lot of incident information from our peers. And so, yeah, there's many different ways we join into the communities we belong to.
Wonderful. I know, yeah, with the city, we have water as a critical service under our umbrella, but gas and electric are on their own. The school district, it's kind of weird how the love is spread around in the city. I'm sure your municipality, city, state, if you're in local government sector, is different. But it's so important that we maintain that relationship, right? Because as Sam mentioned too, like just learning from your peers. You know, who can call somebody? Why? I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel. We don't got time for that. You know, I'm not gonna put nobody's business out there, but there's been some breaches going on. You know, it's like, well, let's talk about that, right? What can I learn from them? And reach out to, because most people in our industry are very willing to share, because they don't want it to happen to you. And I just think it's so important that we promote collaboration, information sharing, and use the resources that are available, like the ones that we just mentioned. So thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions that you want to talk about? Anything? Doesn't have to be anything we talked about. You can, go ahead. You got some serious years up here with cyber. Not me, though. No. Yeah. All right. We got a question. One of our fellow nominees. Congratulations.
Okay. First of all, Jim, I teach at RMU, so I think a bunch of my students have been your interns. So I hope they were all good eggs. So I have a question. Hopefully this isn't going to make it too spicy. But how do you think recent things like CISOs being held personally liable for security failures is going to affect the future generation of people wanting to get into this as a career path?
I like that question. So I have always welcomed audit everywhere I've worked. And if you don't get audited, get yourself audited in some way. Do it yourself. Do a self-assessment and find your gaps and make recommendations to leadership. Those recommendations might include investments and make them reasonable, but investments that you see as being appropriate for the organization that you work in. And I typically, like the incidents that you're asking about, wherein a CISO got charged in some cases for neglect or whatever. I don't know about the details there, but if you cover your bases and CYA, as they say, make sure that if you have the right controls in place, then you've done everything that you can. If you don't have the right controls in place because somebody said you can't afford it, get that in writing. And once you have that audit and you make those recommendations, take that to your boss, whoever that person is, make them take it to the board, whoever they are, if you have a board, or the president or the CEO, and make the investments that need to be made. And sometimes that's in training as well. Don't buy the fancy doodads if you don't know how to manage them. So make sure you get the training to secure your environments and the proper investments are made. So I would say that a CISO that does all that, and if I have an email coming back from my boss that says, we can't afford that EDR, let's just stick with the AV, and then we get popped, well, guess who's, something's in a ringer at that point. I told you we needed this, and this might have prevented that. You said we couldn't afford it. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but that's how you can cover yourself. I mean, no one has an unlimited budget. There are some organizations in here, I'm sure, that have much bigger budgets than others. But once you get that audit and you close the gaps that can be closed, make the recommendations to fill the gaps that there are, make them say, no, you can't have it. Because then you've done your part, really.
So I think we are probably all going to have something to say about this, because it's a great question.
1 minute, though. We got,
Real quick. So
Okay.
two points. One, make sure you're working for the right organization. I went to my executive risk management committee and talked about both SolarWinds and Uber cases so that they understood it, and the board. And we actually, out of that discussion came out a red flags policy mandating for the organization to create mechanisms to be able to whistleblow without retribution. But I've also had the unfortunate experience of mentoring two people that work for the SEC, two CISOs, who came to me asking for guidance because their CFO was filing SEC forms on their behalf with things that they were not comfortable with, and they felt really threatened legally. And so my advice to them was really think long and hard, is that the company that you want to work for? Because your personal liability is at stake. So in those two scenarios, my recommendation is just make sure you're working for the right organization.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that I had learned really quickly, and it's directly related to the new SEC rules, is there's a Venn diagram of reporting to the government and the directors and officers insurance that any CISO needs to have now. And so I had to take a crash course in how do I make sure that I'm covered by that policy because of the liability included. So yeah, there's just so many variables that we have to make sure we're managing.
I would say full transparency. Number one, very tactical, keep a risk register. Every risk that you become aware of, put it on the risk register, investigate it, put the results of your investigation, and make that risk register available through your enterprise risk management program, or if you don't have one, up the chain. And secondly, be honest with the board. Like, if we had a risk that we didn't have the money for, then I would tell the board, this is a really high risk here. We've quantified it. We can't afford to remediate it right now, but there it is. We still have that risk. Now, honestly, to tell you the truth, that happened to me once where I couldn't get the money, and the day before the board meeting, they magically got me the money. So you have to kind of play a game of chicken. Like, honestly, I am going to be honest with the board. They need to know Dawn's not going to cover this up.
Pull that security card. It usually works. All right, there's been a lot of, this is a great conversation, you guys. A lot of gems to like summarize, the importance of third-party risk management. Got some tips on some of the tasks and steps to include in that and the importance there. Thank you for, I thought that was a really good supply chain management call or talk. Look, I work remote. That call was great. The importance of collaboration and, tabletop tests and just sharing your information with others. All above board. Okay, we understand that some of this certainly is not public information. So we're about at time, and this is a surprise. They don't know I'm gonna ask this question, so you're gonna get the real answer. We like the candid stuff. So, and you got 30, 40 seconds. Jim. What's the question? Jim, what would you tell your younger self right now? 30 seconds.
What would I tell my younger
What
self?
advice would you give your younger self right now? It can be anything.
Study hard and learn Linux earlier.
Oh, that's a good one. All right, Don?
Don't be afraid. My whole career has been like, boom, this opportunity falls in my lap, and I think, I can't do that, but it's kind of fun. I think I can't resist, and I did it, and wow, I have had fun. So don't be afraid. Take risks, have fun.
I'd say don't sweat it. Everything's not a crisis. Sometimes it seems like it's a crisis. Just chill out a little bit.
I like that.
Yeah, follow your love. I fell in love with cybersecurity 20 plus years ago, and I haven't looked back. So if it's your passion, embrace it and invest in it. You have to continue to learn, grow, and it'll make you successful.
And mine would be trust the universe, ask and you shall receive. All right, that's it for everybody. Round of applause, thank you. Y'all been beautiful. We'll be here all night. Well, for another hour or so. Okay.